Hello and welcome. Today we're going to delve into the highest award we've discussed on our series, The Million Dollar Breakdown. It involves a $20 million verdict for a crash caused by a sheriff's deputy from Orange County in Florida. This is a really big number. And here to speak about the case is Morgan & Morgan attorney Ryan Rudd. Ryan, glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So this crash occurred in 2019 and involved a motorcyclist and an officer of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Can you tell us how this accident happened?
Sure. The sheriff deputy was leaving his home on his way to work in Orange County. He lived in Seminole County. And our client, Sean Hurley, was traveling down the road and unexpectedly was confronted with this sheriff when he pulled out into oncoming traffic and unfortunately ran directly into our client while he was on his motorcycle.
There was a pretrial settlement offer from the defense that was dwarfed by the final award. What more can you tell us about that pretrial offer?
So prior to going to trial, the top offer made on this particular case was $250,000. It was not something that we or Mr. Hurley thought was anywhere near what his damages were and would be for the rest of his life. So it wasn't a very tough decision to decline the offer.
We'd like to learn more about the client, perhaps how his injuries dramatically changed his life from the one that he'd led before.
Sure. So Sean was a 26-year-old, young, energetic, athletic male. He was a guy that would like to do all types of things, play sports, go riding his bike, play with his dogs. And he suffered, unfortunately, significant catastrophic injuries to his legs and his hip that caused him to be unable to do many of the things that he once was able to do, simple things like walking, running, jumping, riding his bike, playing with his dogs. So unfortunately, these injuries were forever injuries that changed the way he would do things, as simple as going to the bathroom.
I believe there was dash cam footage of the accident, which had to be in vital evidence for this case. What other factors do you think were the most important in this case?
I think the video footage, the dash cam footage that showed the deputy before he pulled out of that into that intersection and also showed the impact itself. I think that was the most damaging. That was the most vital piece of information and evidence that we had, especially since they were disputing liability. I think that was the key piece of evidence that essentially decided the very important disputed issue in this case, which was liability.
Were there any other great obstacles that you faced during the case?
I think the biggest obstacles that we faced were the liability issues. I think the fact that the defendants in this particular case were attempting to do anything and everything to present argument to a jury that our client, Sean, was somehow responsible for this terrible crash and his own injuries that he sustained. So I think by the defense attempting to suggest because Mr. Hurley allegedly was going a few miles an hour over the speed limit or may have been wearing earbuds in his ears at the time of the collision or may have had an issue with his front brake at the time of the collision. I think those were the issues that we had to deal with the most. But as we just talked about, I think the video spoke for itself. And I think that was the vital piece of information that ultimately led the jury to find justice in this issue.
What considerations came into play during the jury selection for you and your team?
I think the biggest issues that we faced was how to present the best we could to the jury in terms of these human damages that Mr. Hurley had sustained, as well as these damages that he was going to continue to deal with for the remainder of his life, only being 29 years old at the time of the trial. And I think presenting that in a way where the jury could comprehend and understand and ultimately come back with a just verdict was really important, and how to present it was vital in ultimately getting the result we did.
Given that, tell us how you prepared for arguments that you anticipated from the opposing counsel.
Really, like I said, the real arguments were the liability issue. That's where the sticking point was in this case. There wasn't much to argue about the damages itself and how they affected Sean. So I think preparing and making sure that we were able to combat these arguments in terms of the things that we've previously talked about, the earbuds in his ears, allegedly, his front brake not having worked for a year prior to this crash, and then ultimately the evidence showing that Mr. Hurley had to speed up a little bit right before the impact to try to avoid it, and explain to the jury that he was not speeding before he had to speed up to try to avoid it. So I think those were the real issues in terms of liability that we had to deal with, and we had to prepare in a way to present the evidence that was actually available, and that was real evidence, not argument, to the jurors that were ultimately going to be deciding the outcome of this particular case.
You tried the case alongside your colleagues Raven Zaheda and Brian McLean. Can you tell us more about how you guys approached and prepared the closing arguments for this case?
Sure. So in preparing for closing arguments, we really had to hone in on the hour and a half we had allotted to us, and it was only a 4-day trial, and we really had to hone in on how we were going to present these human damages to the jury, as well as this liability argument that was out there within an hour and a half, and really present it in a way that there was no question at the end of our presentation that this defendant was 100% at fault for this collision, and that these injuries were so debilitating and so catastrophic that the last 3.5 years of Mr. Hurley's life has been miserable and something nobody would wish upon anyone, and that what the next 43 years of his projected life expectancy was going to look like with these ongoing issues, the future medical procedures he was going to need and will need, and ultimately present these human damages in a way where it was understood by the 6 people in the jury that this was their one opportunity to deliver justice, and we had to present it in a way that they understood it. It was clear, and that there was no question that when they came back and they presented their verdict, that it was something that was going to take care of Mr. Hurley for the rest of his life.
In hindsight, were there any personal takeaways for you from this case? Perhaps something that you learned during the course of the trial?
I mean, every trial is different, and you learn something from every trial that you have. This particular one was just a reminder of that what we're doing is essentially, we can't fix, unfortunately, our clients. We don't have a magic wand to make their problems, their injuries, and these issues go away completely. But it reminds us that we're doing something that, nobody else can do for them, and that's bring closure to a terrible event in their lives, and ultimately bring about some form of relief, so they can, in some way, shape, or form, move forward from the tragic incident or event for which brought us to the ultimate day of trial.
Right. Brian, thank you very much for your time and for bringing this case to us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.